Europe, the 7th century. A time when rulers fought one another for control over what remained of the fallen Roman Empire. In 711, the Christian King Roderick took the throne of Spain, unaware of a new force rising in Arabia. And when the commanders of the Muslim army challenged King Roderick, it was a major turning point in Europe's history. When the Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, the Visigoths moved down from the east of Germany into Italy, France, and Spain. Europe had become a bloody battleground, with roving bands of mercenaries and warring kingdoms. These were the Dark Ages. The Visigoths had settled in Spain, with its hot and harsh climate. Over the centuries which followed, they brought terror to the peasant farmers, who turned to the Christian Church for protection.
Who can relate such perils? Who can number such grievous disasters? Even if every limb were transformed, it would be beyond human nature to express.
The story now begins.
It was in the 4th year of the reign of the Emperor Justinian that Walid received the scepter of the Saracens and succeeded his father as ruler of the Arabs.
The new caliph was Walid I. He was a follower of Islam, the new religion founded in Arabia by a prosperous merchant named Muhammad. In a series of visions, the angel Gabriel revealed the word of God to the prophet Muhammad.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, recite in the name of your Lord who created man from clots of blood. Recite, your Lord is the most bountiful one, who by the pen taught man what he did not know.
The words of God were recorded in the Quran. Allah Akbar was their prayer. God is the greatest, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. There is only one God. God is the greatest. With astonishing speed, Muhammad's followers created an empire, conquering and converting villages, towns, cities, and whole states throughout the Middle East. While other armies were slow and cumbersome, the Arabs could stay in the saddle all day, travel great distances, and strike when least expected. Using traditional tactics of desert warfare, the Arabs overwhelmed all opposition. They would attack swiftly at their enemy's weakest points and then collect food and recruits to reinforce their army for its relentless expansion. The Arab Empire grew rich as the Islamic armies spread the new religion from Mecca in Arabia through the Middle East into Egypt and across North Africa. By the beginning of the 8th century, they had reached the edge of Europe. The Arab ruler Walid appointed Musa ibn Nuzair to be the new governor of North Africa. Musa turned to Spain, where his spies told him that the Visigothic kingdom was in turmoil. Wititza, the Christian king of Spain, who had ruled for only 9 years, suddenly died. By tradition, when a king grew old, the Visigoth barons would gather to choose a successor. The unexpected death of the king left a dangerous power vacuum. The leaders of the church were worried. A new king had to be found. It was at this point, wrote the chronicler, that a Visigothic baron called Roderick
rebelliously seized the kingdom at the instigation of the palace officials and his supporters.
Roderick was a powerful chieftain whose power base was the town of Mérida in southern Spain. Roderick was confident that he could defeat the other barons and rule the country, and this was his chance. He quickly organized an army and marched to the capital to claim the throne. In the unstable climate of that time, all the laws were drafted by the church, and even after seizing the throne, Roderick would not survive unless the bishops gave their blessing to his coronation. The church was most anxious for the stability and protection that a strong king could offer. The beginning of a new reign was a particularly vulnerable time, a time when a king might be challenged and have to prove himself in battle. This was especially true for Roderick. Roderick enjoyed strong backing from his home region in the south, but few northern barons offered their support. The church decided to back Roderick as the candidate most likely to unite the kingdom of the Visigoths. This coronation was a step into the unknown. Could Roderick hold the kingdom together? traditional crown of Visigothic kings was lowered over Roderick's head, he still faced powerful rivals. Legend has it that Roderick was an impatient man who had no time for tradition.
In the royal city of Toledo stood the House of Wisdom, a locked tower said to contain magic secrets. It is said it was the tradition for Visigoth kings when they ascended the throne that they should add one more lock to the door to give protection to those secrets. Roderick refused to follow this tradition and climbed to the top of the tower. To the horror of his people, Roderick demanded that the door be opened. Alone, he entered that room. Upon the table was a casket inlaid with gold and jewels. Inside, Roderick found a parchment with a terrifying prophecy. When this house and this casket which has been so wisely locked shall be opened, then shall the nation shown here enter the land, and the kingdom shall be blotted out. At these words, Roderick wept for what he had done.
Any regrets Roderick felt were quickly forgotten when he set out to stop the continuous raids launched by the Basques in northern Spain. Roderick knew that if the Basques were not suppressed, other regions would break away and his whole kingdom could crumble. He set off for the far north of Spain, unaware of the even greater threat to his kingdom that lay to the south. Before they could ever conquer Spain, the Arabs first had to consolidate their rule in North Africa. The Berbers were a fiercely independent people, whose very name came from the Latin barbarus, or barbarian. Once they had lived throughout this region, but the encroaching Arab armies had pushed them back to the security of their mounting strongholds. From here, they could launch swift attacks and ambush the Arabs. In one such attack, they had killed the commander of the Arab forces. It had taken 30 years and many epic battles before the Berbers finally surrendered to Arab rule. The Berbers converted to Islam and fought for the Arab Empire. The main Berber leader was Tariq ibn Ziyad, fearless and deadly, like the cobra. His family had originally been enslaved by the Arabs and later converted to Islam. Tariq was summoned to a meeting with the new Arab governor, Musa ibn Nusayr. Tariq had earned his freedom through loyalty to his Arab masters. Musa was recruiting troops for the raid he was planning on southern Spain. Musa entrusted this to Tariq and ordered him to bring his fighters to the port of Tangier. 20 miles across the sea lay Spain. Musa was determined she would now surrender her wealth. Tariq would lead the first raiding party to test the resistance of the defending Visigoths. In the year 711, with a force of 700 men, Tariq set sail for Spain. They landed at the foot of a large rock, which is known to this day as Gibraltar, from the Arab, Jabal al-Tariq, Tariq's Rock. The Arabs met little resistance as they established their base. The Visigoths were in disarray, still fighting among themselves over Roderick's succession to the throne. Tariq could never have expected it to be so easy, as he pushed on from Gibraltar and set out to establish Arab control over the Spanish coastline. The new invaders pushed inland, past the crumbling Roman ruins, threatening the rise of a new empire to rule over Spain. When the Visigoths finally reacted, a messenger was dispatched to spread the news. Roderick's supporters warned their king that a full-scale invasion of southern Spain was taking place. A chain of messengers had to travel over 600 miles to reach the king. When he was told that the Arab raiders only numbered a few hundred men, Roderick was confident that his royal troops could defeat the invaders. Without waiting to raise a larger force, the impatient Roderick set off for the south. After an exhausting march, Roderick and his troops moved into the Guadalquivir river valley. The Visigoths were used to fighting battles in which the opposing forces took positions facing each other across the battlefield. This time, they faced a very different enemy, one that was fresh and mobile and attacked with lightning speed. Tariq's Berber warriors went straight for Roderick, because they knew that once the king fell, the battle would be won. The Berbers quickly surrounded the exhausted Visigoths. Tariq looked on as his troops won the day. King Roderick was killed. News of Tariq's stunning victory soon reached Musa in North Africa. Spain was now at his mercy. Musa landed with a large army in southern Spain, determined to complete the conquest. Roderick's death left the Visigoths hopelessly divided. Tariq took Cordoba and the royal city of Toledo. Musa captured Seville. After a string of successes, the two commanders met. Musa deliberately humiliated Tariq. He reinforced Tariq's subordinate status and demonstrated publicly that he, Musa, was in total charge. What was left of King Roderick's forces took refuge in Merida. The town was surrounded by the Arab forces. The Visigoths desperately held out for 4 months until they ran out of food and water and were forced to surrender. Musa's retribution was savage. All the surviving males in Merida were killed and the women and children were made slaves. After seeing what happened at Merida, other Spanish towns quickly submitted to Arab rule and signed the treaties offered by Musa.
Those who surrender and submit themselves to the patronage of God and become clients of his prophet will not be killed, enslaved, or separated one from another. They will not be molested in the performance of their religion, nor will their churches be destroyed.
With the Spanish cities paying an annual tax on their citizens and slaves, Musa was reaping a rich income both for the Arab Empire and himself. The chronicler recorded that Spain was enslaved and destroyed by Musa. But Walid, the Arab caliph in Damascus, became jealous of Musa's wealth and power.
After some 18 months, Musa was summoned by the order of the princes, and he returned to his homeland and presented himself to the Caliph Walid. Musa brought with him from Spain gold and silver, a large quantity of valuable ornaments, and precious stones and pearls.
Walid belittled Musa, fined him heavily, and sentenced him to death. Musa handed over his entire fortune, and his life was spared. He lived his remaining days in poverty and disgrace. With Musa's fall, Tariq also lost his command. He left Spain and returned to his Berber roots in North Africa, a defeated man, his future uncertain. The Arab victory over Spain was truly a turning point in European history. The Arabs stayed in Spain for 700 years. They introduced advanced techniques of irrigation and agriculture from the Middle East into Europe. They brought with them many Greek and Arabian manuscripts, which shaped the future of Western mathematics, philosophy, and science. If the Arabs had not invaded Spain, or if King Roderick had turned back their attack, the history of Western civilization could have been very different. Arab knowledge and literature led to the Great Renaissance in Europe, and without the benefits of Arab science, perhaps Christopher Columbus might never have discovered America.